was interested, you said at the panel that most of the stuff that you composed for Pam and Tommy didn't get used.
No. A couple of the very initial ideas that I had.
Right. Okay.
I presented, and it was like, oh, I don't think that's exactly quite the character, and so we kind of adjust things or start a couple things over, and then once we're in the ballpark, then.
Okay. I imagine that happens a lot.
Sometimes. Yeah, it's I would say it's a big gray area. I would say sometimes you write a theme and it's like, oh, this is perfect, leave it. We want the theme all over the place, and sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes it's somewhere in there. I love how it starts, but then I don't like the B section. So there's not really a solid answer to that question.
Do you ever take those ideas that don't get used and repurpose them in another project?
Well, has it happened? I'm sure it's happened. I think legally I'm not allowed to. Legally anything I write for a film, even if it's not used, is owned by the production company.
That makes sense.
But, you work with people enough, or you have, a shorthand with someone who's just like, I don't like that, don't want to hear it again, use it for something else, and it's kind of casual permission to use. I don't know if I've actually done it this way. Possibly. Wink, wink. Go ahead.
You've been tapped to be composer for Young Jedi Adventures, and congratulations on that.
Thanks.
What's your approach going to be to making the music familiar but very much your own?
I have no idea. Entering into that world is really daunting. There's only a couple people that have been in that world of composing. There's one in particular. I haven't started yet. I've written a couple themes that are very well liked. But as far as the general sound and the general world that we live in, as far as the sonic palette, and I haven't really seen any footage yet. I'm not actually supposed to get started on writing the first episode until a couple months from now. So we've been messing around with some themes and some things to get me thinking, except I haven't really started writing proper music for it yet,
As part of that research, might you listen to some of Giacchino's work or Powell's work, who being in that universe but obviously aren't John Williams?
But not John Williams. That's an interesting thought. Maybe, you also have to consider if they wanted the score to sound like solo or something, they probably would have given John Powell a call. I think it's my approach might be, and again, I haven't really had that many conversations with production about this yet, but it's what are the, when I was doing Kingsman, for example, we didn't want the music to sound like James Bond, but obviously the whole Kingsman franchise is a respectful homage and a nod to the British espionage genre. So we were kind of what are those devices that we know and that remind us of that? But I didn't necessarily go back and try to rip off any Lalo Schifrin scores or anything like this, or But maybe that will be the same thing where it's listen to be influenced slightly by some of the symphonic work from Star Wars, or even some of the kind of more contemporary stuff that Ludwig did. But I don't really know yet. I haven't really put my brain in the driver's seat yet. I'm finishing some other stuff first, to be honest with you.
And see, building on that, I'm curious. Obviously not seeing any finished product yet to compose. Do you at least get sketches or outlines of, hey, this is what the story's going to be, or do you literally have to go in cold in 2 months?
When I first started demoing for the project, I was basically given a paragraph of a synopsis of a portion of a scene, and it's this is what might be happening. Try to come up with but other than that, I haven't. I really know nothing about the story. I know nothing. It's tough to answer those questions because at this point, September, I think mid-September, I have kind of my initial conversations to get started on it. It's so funny because I have a nephew who's back on the East Coast who is a huge Star Wars fan. Knows all of the expanded universes and watched all the show, read all the graphic novels and everything. And I'm calling, and he knows more about the show than I do at this point. But yeah, I'm super excited to see what it is. What I do know is that it's the first time dived into like material that is specifically for like 3 to 5, 7-year-olds, So I imagine there's going to be kind of a delicacy in the lessons that are taught, and like the real kind of stripped down lessons that you would teach 3-year-olds. I would imagine at this point.
How hard is it to settle on the tone of a project?
How hard is it?
Yeah.
I don't think it's that difficult. I think that a lot of the times, for me, it's double-ended, because you could get so much from a script. You could read a script and be like, oh, I know, I could picture this is going to be like Drive, or I could picture it's going to be like, some other show, just tonally in the color. But then once you see it, you could have been completely off basis, or like the script is also just a roadmap that they go into shooting with, and so a lot of the times there are detours, and they've got to take the detour. So I like to also just the first time you watch the film, assuming we're talking about a film, it's the only time you get to watch it for the first time. So that impression of like the color scheme, how fast is the edits, how grainy does it look, how do the blacks look on the screen, how sharp is everything, I think that is, I try to kind of like go into it consciously knowing this is the first time and the only time I can watch it for the first time. So let's be really conscious of my impression of how I'm feeling, So that definitely would influence totally what I do musically.
Between Alice's Wonderland Bakery, Lyle, Crocodile, and then the upcoming Young Jedi Adventures, you're doing a lot of projects that are family-friendly oriented.
Yeah.
Does that assist your creative process when projects that are targeting a certain general age demographic kind of come in quick succession?
It's a really interesting question, and it's something that I'm emotionally very aware of right now, because my world pre-COVID was very much G.I. Joe and Kingsman and Pirates and doing these things that are like high-octane action, adult, visceral music for these types of films. And then COVID happened, and I moved my studio home because of the obvious reasons. And I knocked down my garage and built a studio there to write out of, instead of the place the studio that I was going into every day for the past 15 years. And this odd thing happened where it wasn't something that we purposefully did, but these calls started coming in for more kid-friendly, family-friendly, and I started demoing for these things and started getting them. And it was this shift that wasn't, like I said, wasn't intentional. And I have to say that it's a whole different world for me, because it's not necessarily, a lot of the times with these kind of adult action films, the music is like, it's how cool is it, how visceral is it. It's almost like making a record where a lot of the stuff is right at the front of the speaker, and it's very aggressive and abrasive. And you need to be cool, and you need to like how much more aggressive can it be, And with these kids films, it's all about just like melody and tune and working out the harmonies, and it's a whole different world for me. And I have to say that I couldn't be enjoying it more. I absolutely love it. It's making me really enjoy, and maybe the pendulum will swing the other way, and I'll get absolutely tired of it. But working with Alice, and especially working with Lyle, which is just such a beloved, and I didn't know this going into it, which is such a beloved children's book. And then once I started doing the research, it's like, there's a whole series, and this thing's like really held preciously amongst parents and children. It's made me a better person. Like, it's absolutely made me a better father, a better husband, a better person. I'm like happier, like going in to work every day, like working with these tunes and not watching bullets flying and heads rolling every day. I don't know if that was the initial question we had asked, but it is totally different. It's me working, especially with Alice, is very traditional sonically. I'm working with the Western Orchestra, so I'm not reinventing the wheel sonically. I'm not working with like synthesizers and trying to recreate drum beats, but it's more just about very simple tunes and how I can manipulate them to get these emotions across to a 3-year-old, which is it's an exercise in itself.
You mentioned Lyle. What sounds and instruments did you lean on to bring that character to life?
Lyle was interesting. I'm just finishing up Lyle. I have probably about less than 10 minutes left to write. I recorded orchestra in like 3 or 4 weeks. And it was a tricky balancing act because it's a musical. There are a number of songs I don't know, 6, 8 songs that are written by Pasek and Paul, great songs, but they have to be the lead singer of the band. They have to be the lead singer of the musical. They should be. The songs, I mean, are so musically speaking for the underscore. It was a little bit of a lesson for me in restraining myself not to go too overboard with the orchestration, with the even though Lyle is animated, it's not very flourishy. It's every time I kind of went, I had to figure out where the threshold was for the filmmakers of how much I could say musically and how showy we could be, because it's like, oh no, hold on, we've got a huge song coming up in 6 minutes, and we don't want to. That needs to be the showcase, you know. And also, you've got this. It's so profound watching the animatics of the crocodile that I'm writing to, and then when we get visual effects updates, and you see, okay, now it's colored. Okay, oh, now they've done the shadowing and the texturing, and once they do the eyes, which is where you just get the emotion from. I have to do less. You know, we may have a sad moment of Lyle on the screen, which I've like tried to really pull the heartstrings. But once his eyes are fully rendered, it's like, oh no. With the music, with the eyes in motion, it's now too much. So it's my job then to kind of sand my music down and figure out what the balance is, so we're not spoon feeding the audience too much. You know, you don't want to be, because then it just gets a bit saccharine. You know, it just gets a bit cheesy then. So it's just that, and it's an interesting process doing it with, like I said, with the updates and the course of the process of, first I just get sketches of first of all, actually it's an actor with an alligator face on, like a mask, you know, and then as they slowly swap these out, it's fascinating, you know, and it just proves to me about I'm just one cog in this greater wheel of making something like this happen, you know.
So I'm curious about the creative process in terms of, you mentioned that you go in your studio to work naturally, but I've always been fascinated, like, what happens, like, you say you're out to dinner, you're in a mall in the movie, does stuff just come to you and you're like, what do I do, or how does that happen?
If you were to go through, and I will never let anyone see this because it's something I hold very close to me, but if you were to go into my voice recorder on my phone, there's probably a couple dozen hours of 30-second clips of me going, oh, this could be for Lyle Disappointment. And I go, and it goes something like this, and then the brass goes, and I can't sing, so it's just, it would be embarrassing to listen to it. But yeah, that's a huge lifesaver for me, because I pop out of the shower when my phone is on the counter and sing something into it for 10 seconds, put it down. And a third of them I'll go back to because I'll remember that I had thought of something. But yeah, and then, you know, as far as being creatively stuck, I think with television, because I really haven't done that much television in the past until the Disney shows. I did a show called Wrecked a couple years ago, which was a TBS comedy, which was hilarious. But it's a different workflow than films, from my experience at least. Like, you know, for films you have one chance to do a scene, and once you're on episode 18 of Alice, you're like, I've done this scene 17 other times. Not just, but it's television, and so it's very formulaic, and so it's a different skill set. It's like, well, now how can I do this a different way? How can I reorchestrate this, or how can I manipulate the theme in a different way, which is fun. Whereas with a film, it's like, I've got one way. What if I have two different thoughts? Should I take 2 days to execute both of those thoughts, or should I just run with one? But and with TV, of course, it's just relentless, man. It's, for Alice, it's 22 minutes of music every 2 weeks, and there's just no ifs, ands, or buts. You just kind of have to, like, not second guess yourself and just get it out. You know, luckily, if you feel, what if I went to the next episode to kind of try that trope, because it's very formulaic.
I have a kind of random question. Is there an instrument that you've wanted to put in a score that you haven't been able to, that you, like, like a rant, like I don't know, the didgeridoo or something?
I put in a couple. I always thought it would be fun to put kazoos in, and I put in some kazoos in Alice. They've kind of become our. And at first it was for there was one moment in I think one of the first episodes or the second episodes which was like a ta-da moment, and literally the music goes ba-bum. And at first I did that with just kazoos, and they were like, it's a bit kazooey. And so I think I actually just doubled it with brass, with some trumpets, so it would just not make it sound as a mix of it. So there's kazoos. As far as other weirder instruments, I don't know if anything specifically coming to mind. I think it's always fun to kind of, like just sonic drones or pads or synth kind of like ambiences. I always find, because anyone can kind of go out and buy a library and hold down a key and it goes yow or I always find it kind of cool to take other things like a car horn or something and stretch it out to be 5 minutes long so it no longer sounds like that's always fun for me as far as like experimenting with things that are not necessarily Western orchestra. Take a knock on the table and put that through a 20-minute reverb, so now all of a sudden I've got this ambience, which is no one else has that in the world but me because I recorded the knock. I don't know about other instruments. Kazoos. I'll go with kazoos.
You mentioned earlier how with Lyle Crocodile, Patrick and Paul are the lead singers, you're sometimes having to rein yourself in. How does this experience compare to Rocket Man?
Rocket Man, I feel like, so with Rocket Man, first of all, there was a lot more songs in Rocket Man. So the fellow who produced all the songs for Rocket Man was Giles Martin. Son of the George Martin, and I worked very closely with him because almost for every song in Rocket Man, we go from a scene with score, and then all of a sudden they start singing, and then it goes back into score narrative. And so what we found at first was that a lot of the times my score would be going on, and then when the song starts, it was almost like someone hit play on a CD player, and it's like, here's the song. So we really had to work on cross-pollinating my cues musically to go into the intros of his songs and then out of the outros back into my cues, where I would say, hey Giles, can you give me the stems for yours? And I would start muting and putting some stuff and replacing, and then I'd give it back to him, and then he'd take mine and start. So we kind of became this homogenous, soundscape. And I was over in London, and we were both working at the same studio right down the hall, so it was very easy to kind of like really get incestuously collaborative in cross-pollinating the songs and score. In Lyle, there's much less of that behavior simply because there's not that many songs. And I think out of all the songs, I think it's like 6 or 7, 8 original songs we have. Out of them, there's maybe only 3 that really cross-pollinate between score and score. So on those 3, we did the same process that Giles and I did of me getting their stuff and kind of working with it, and then me giving it back to them, and then working with mine. But it's been definitely more separation of church and state with Lyle. And I've taken, where necessary, I've taken some of the hooks from the songs and incorporated them into the score. To Easter egg, a little bit of Easter egg behavior as far as like, oh, did he just quote that song that we're going to hear in 20 minutes, but you don't know that at the time because we haven't gotten the song yet, or a song that you might hear at the beginning of the movie, and then maybe at the end that story theme comes up, so I'll start playing that tune with the orchestra of the song, if that makes sense. So there's a little bit of cross-pollination, but not nearly as much as Rocket Man.
I'm good for it now.
I don't have any more.
Last thing for me is you've worked a lot with Henry Jackman, yourself, and Dominic. Could you talk a little bit about Henry's influence on your work, your career, and just him as a person?
Yeah, Henry's great. Henry called me a couple days ago because we were talking about so we write music on 2 different pieces of software, and we're always kind of BSing each other of which one is better. And we were talking about that a couple days ago. But Henry's influence on me, I think, if I were to kind of strip it down, is Henry comes from, before Henry even got into film music, he was a record producer. He was working with Trevor Horn, he worked with Seal, he was making records, and so it's a whole different way of looking at instruments and layering things, and Henry is very focused on space, and he gets really into production, and he gets really into like, how's this EQ'd, and how's this distorted, and how's the delay on this, and why would you have, what was behind the decision of having the clarinet play the same line as the French horn in the same octave? It's like, well, no, let's just have the clarinet and enjoy the clarinet. That's my Henry impression. So I think I learned a lot of, because there's also there's a European British sensibility, whereas an American, you grow up more listening to different types of music, perhaps. And I'm like, let's do the kitchen sink because then it'll be more powerful. I mean, let's have the piano and the French horn and the clarinet play and so those type of giving instruments their day in the sun, and giving the lead singer their day in the sun, and often those orchestrational techniques of some space is something I really absorbed from working from Henry. The Kingsman was the perfect opportunity for us to kind of tag team something, because it is a British espionage, so you get the classiness and the kind of that legacy from what Henry brought to the table, but also it's a high octane action film, and so I could get involved with some like synths and some bass and some guitar and get in there and give it the kind of the dirtiness that it needed to be to make it that exciting.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great, thank you. Cool, thanks a lot, guys.